This session, like we can see from our agenda, is identifying and understanding how to work with existing structures in the community. And by existing structures, we mean individuals that, what comes to mind is actually stakeholders, because to my understanding, and I know we're already on the same page, advocacy, let me not provide my line of thought just yet. I want them to share from their line of thought. So advocacy doesn't involve some things, and it involves some things. So we'll be hearing from here. My experience, I'm just going to share a short experience, and that would be a guiding pathway for this conversation. So I remember, alongside with, of course, with Youth Hub Africa, there's a particular advocacy. We've run several advocacy, but one particular one that strikes me in this conversation is the child rights advocacy. So from yesterday, I know Mr. Rotimi was talking about failed advocacy and advocacies that have actually been a success, failed based on the outcome, not being able to actually attain the objective of the advocacy, right? So one, and he made mention of Kano, one that had to do with the child rights bill and how the thing was on hold and all of that, and then it even took him to have to travel even after several advocacies, right? So one of the states we were actually working on too was Kaduna State, and then there was something that eventually happened at the end of the day with Kaduna State. They passed the child rights bill, but they changed the nomenclature, that's, they changed the name. So they called it the Child Protection and Welfare Bill. Now, it was obvious that they had a problem with the name. They said it was some kind of misinformation or misunderstanding, not misinformation, of the name. The indigents in Kaduna State and people who reside in Kaduna State had issues with the name because they felt that the Child Rights Bill meant that the child had rights, superior rights over their parents, and would not be able to be controlled. So they changed the name, and they adjusted some things in the bill as well too that would not hinder or obstruct the religious beliefs and the cultural beliefs of that particular area, right? So they had to check with the Council of Ulamas, check some other things, which were some of the factors that affected the passage of the Child Rights Bill in northern Nigeria. We're on the same page, right? So I have already set the path now. So my first question basically is goes to Shamwil. What are your thoughts on? Do you think advocacy is a one-man thing? Do you think it involves, most times involves more than an individual in advocacy?
Okay, thank you all, and thank you for the question. As you already gave a view of advocacy that have succeeded in Kaduna regarding Child Rights Act, and also advocacy that has failed regarding the outcome in Kano. Both of the advocacy, whether it is a failed advocacy or a successful advocacy, it's not a one-man job. Any advocacy, whether you succeed or you fail, you cannot do it as a stand-alone activity or job. Advocacy, you are supposed to, depending upon what are you advocating for, or what do you want to achieve, then you identify your stakeholders in that particular area. A typical instance of the Child Rights Act is the reason why in most of the northern states they decided to change the title from Child Rights Act to Child Protection Act is because of the peculiarity of traditional and cultural beliefs in that particular part of the world. Most of the states that have accepted to domesticate or adopt the act decided to change it from Child Rights Act to Child Protection Act, simply because they want to ensure that all the stakeholders involved. If you can remember, yesterday we were talking about partners. There are some partners that they will not contribute anything in your advocacy success, but not involving them will create a very huge gap or obstruction of your success toward achieving your set objectives. So those stakeholders in the area of child rights are ulamas and pastors. They feel like if you stated it as Child Rights Act, the societal norms perceive it as giving a child power and superiority over his parent or guardians. So therefore, they feel like changing the title will help immensely in the acceptance of the society toward that particular advocacy. So they come up with the concept of Child Protection Act. It sent a very different message, but the main content of the act, most of it remained the same, but the title has changed. So it gives you what? It informs you that in doing an advocacy, you can change your title. You can change your title as well as even mode of operation when you see that your title may not give you the success you desire. When the advocacy started, it is a Child Rights Act, but along the way, when other stakeholders were involved, they feel like instead of Child Rights Act, it changed to Child Protection Act. And in Nigeria and in most of African countries, whatever you are advocating, even if you are advocating for construction of a road in a particular community, if the gatekeepers, when I say gatekeepers, I mean the existing structure in that particular community, which include traditional leaders, religious leaders, youth leaders, women leaders, market group people, depending upon whatever kind of project or advocacy you want to do, these kind of stakeholders must be part and parcel of it. Because the more you did not involve them, you have failed before you even started. You have lost the advocacy before you even started. But if you take them along, some of even the wording that you are going to use toward the community or policy makers to accept that particular advocacy project, they can help you in suggesting what term to use and what not to use. I can remember when we wanted to do one family planning campaign in Sokoto State. Instead of using family planning campaign, based on advocacy consultation we did, we found out that using child spacing is more preferable and acceptable to the society there. So we just changed it. The main content of our project did not change, but the heading changed from family planning advocacy to child spacing advocacy.
What was the issue with the name family planning generally?
Because the major issue is that when you put the word family planning in most of our northern cities and communities, they feel like you are trying to demarcate or limit the number of children that a person or a woman is supposed to give birth to.
Okay.
Instead of that, we use child spacing and showcase to them the health as well as economic benefits the families stand to gain as a result of child spacing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shamu. So the one that caught my attention was the child spacing. What existing platforms did you work with then in that location to be able to promote your advocacy or push for? Was there even an outcome? Was there a positive outcome?
Yeah.
Okay, just briefly share with us the outcome and what platforms, like by platforms we mean coalition, association in that location that you worked with.
Okay, one of the major stakeholders that we use or structure existing in the community that we use is the traditional institutions. Notable among them, some of you who have attended different meetings and conferences of family planning, you will see the representative of Sultan of Sokoto, popularly known as Sarkinyak Ngagi, who is a very well close to the Sultan, and we were able to get his own buy-in into the advocacy. So as we all know, traditional institution has a very strong influence in our communities. For him to accept our messages and advocacy purpose, that is the best win we have. Because whenever a traditional leader or a religious leader speak or talk about a particular topic, the societal, if he is in support of it and he talk about it, the other people in the society will support it. If you talk about it and reject it outright, the whole society will frown at it and reject it. So that is one of the institutions we use as at that time. We also use women group. And even though, for me personally, I will have, if it's today I'm going to do it, I will have done it differently. Because that is one of the mistakes we tend to do in advocating for child spacing or family planning. You only involve women group. Well, it is not only a woman issue, it is a societal issue. It takes two to tango, as the popularly said it. Men too has a very strong role to play in ensuring that their women access family planning services. So, and in most of our households, in the northern region, you find out that man is like the king of the house. He has the alpha and the omega say in most of the activities of the house. If a man decided that his wife is not even going for antenatal care during her pregnancy, she is not going. And there is nothing you can do about it. So if you get his own buy-in and make him as a stakeholder, as a partner in advocating for that particular child's person, you will have his buy-in and support. And more women will be allowed to access FP services. Thank you.
So aside the buy-in of the traditional institution, that's you said the Sultan, what other platform did you leverage on? Was it just majorly the Sultan that was a key platform for you?
No, it's not only the Sultan. The existing civil society organization in the area that are working in the areas of sexual and reproductive health were also being involved. Also, the youth group were also involved. This, just to showcase to you, as I said earlier, it is not a one-man job. It is not a one-man or a one-gang activity. Those are stakeholders in the society. I can remember also back in 2007, we have done a similar work in Adamawa when we created this Majalisi discussion group, when more men were invited to discuss about reproductive health issues. So before you know it, elderly people normally, not younger one. So before, and most often married elderly people. So before you know it, when they go back to their group that they discuss, Majalisi is just like a place where people of particular age will sit in the evening or afternoon to discuss about different issues. It can be political, health, economic, whatever. They will discuss about it. So when we involve those Majalisi group into discussion about reproductive health, the change in the attitude of a lot of women happen. Most of men that think they will not allow their women to go for antenatal care or to access FP services, they begin to change that wrong narrative or perception. And it helps on more women getting health services during their pregnancy period.
So it means more women started turning up for antenatal in hospitals. Okay, we will go straight to Zainab now. Zainab, you have worked with Center for Girls Education, right? CGE. And your work has reached several stakeholders, including children. And so what were the existing platforms you used? Like what networks did you use? Was it just teachers? How were you able to go about the advocacy?
Okay, hello, my name is Zainab. I've worked with Center for Girls Education for over 10 years now as a volunteer and also as a staff. So our major focus of work lies in ensuring that girls are retained in school and are able to complete secondary school before they get married. So, we have issues of early marriage in northern Nigeria that is very rampant in northern Nigeria, and that is what we are trying to reduce, because our organization came up as a result of the death rate of maternal mortality and child mortality. And when we discussed with stakeholders on how to prevent such issues, they came up with girls' education. People felt that if girls are educated and they are able to stay longer in school, they don't marry early, and they are able to have a voice and say what they want to be in life and all that. So our major strengths in advocacy have been working with traditional religious leaders, as Shamwil clearly stated, and also the community members. Apart from the traditional religious leaders, we have some strong gatekeepers within the communities. Some people who are neither the traditional leaders or religious leaders, but like they have money within the community, so they have a stronghold in the community. People easily do what they say. And especially also the youth groups, especially the men, the boys, they also have a strong say, because in the north generally, women don't have that power to say what they want to be in life. It's usually the decision of their parents, or decisions, if a father is not alive, it's the decision of the elder brother that decides what a girl should be in life. So we work with all these key stakeholders. It took us a long time to identify the people we think were key. So we, let's say 3-4 years. So we went to Niger one time like that. We went to Niger because we had, they had a husband school structure that was working well for them. So we went and had a study tour. So, okay, for them in Niger, they were actually doing it under a UNFPA funded project. So they were, we have similar issues with Niger, early marriage and other things. So, and they wanted women to have access to family planning services. So they decided to work with the husbands of those girls to form a champions group that will champion women's access to family planning. So when we came back, we sat down, we re-strategized on what we learned and adapted it. So in our community champions spaces that we have two community champion spaces, the role model mothers and the husband schools, apart from the traditional religious leaders that we work with. So for example, for the community champions, the male community champions, in that group you will find the traditional leader of that community, the religious leader of that community, the head of the Matasa group, the men Matasa group in that community. If there is a teacher association, an SBMC association, you find members from that association in that community and other key stakeholders within that community that we think might have an influence, who talk and champion girls' education, access to adolescent sexual and reproductive health information, and also GBV information and prevention. So we work with these men. We meet with them, they have a facilitator, and also apart from the work we do with them, they on their own facilitate to the communities. Like in marriage ceremonies, we have had a lot of instances where our girls are slated to get married off while they are still schooling, and as a result of that community champions groups, the marriage is called off. So, and we have had as like for example in Bauchi last year, we had a situation where a family was recognized to not allowing their girls to go to school, but the boys were going to school. And those members mobilized, went and talked to the father. He told them that he didn't have the money to send both girls and boys to school, so he decided to send the boys. They mobilized, got resources, paid school fees of those girls, bought uniforms, even without us going in. So it's also a strategy for sustainability for us, because we know that when we go out, we move out of that community, that things will continue and girls will continue. Okay, traditional leaders, religious leaders, men groups, the Matasa groups, you find community members, but they always have a leader, even if it is not official, but they always have a leader. So then the SBMC, PTA, school-based management committees, then parents teachers associations within those communities we get, and also security outfits that are in there. Like they have, sometimes you will see that they have, what do we call them in Hausa? Mbanga. So because we want to make sure that our girls are secure within those communities, we also involve the Mbanga within those as clubs that we have. Yes. Yes, youth groups, yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you much.
Okay. So my next question goes to Muazu. What has been a successful advocacy you've pushed, and what platforms, what youth groups helped you out in your advocacy? Thank you.
Thank you, Malti, and I'm actually going to build on what the two speakers have said. Yeah, okay. I actually going to talk about the same family planning that Shamuel cited in Sokoto. Yeah. So actually I work in Sokoto, and I've worked with different international organizations implementing maternal, newborn, and child health project, family planning, and reproductive health projects. The first project that I work with, called Targeted Starter Impact Project, we work in Sokoto and Bauchi. But this experience is actually specific to Sokoto. We were actually looking for how to get religious leaders involved in promoting family planning, simply because we all know Northern Nigeria is a very conservative society, and actually it will take a religious leader just a sermon or a session of preaching of 5 minutes to destroy a whole situation or a whole thing based on his interpretation. And we actually thought of engaging religious leaders, because we work in 23 local governments. So we thought of engaging religious leaders and traditional leaders. Otherwise, a targeted start impact project is a project funded by USAID, implemented by Johnson Incorporation alongside other international organizations, actually. We involved some key key religious leaders in the state and key religious leaders. We started with the training for them to understand why are we promoting family planning in Sokoto, or why should they talk about family planning in Sokoto. We showed them the data as of then actually below 1% out of, let me say, all women in Sokoto of childbearing age. Actually, it's only 1% or less than 1% that are using childbirth spacing contraceptions. So we met, we introduced the whole topic, we trained them, they understand the reason, but they see it's actually a no-go area for them, simply because of fear of what might follow after from their people. The religious leaders are not ready to talk about it. Some of them are even saying it is not religious. The traditional leaders actually doesn't want to involve themselves in what will get their followers angry. So we kept on. We have our regular meetings. We only finally ended with one scholar and one religious leader. And that religious leader is Serkinyak Ngagi that Shamwil cited. Serkinyak Ngagi is just a district head out of about 200 plus district heads in Sokoto. So that means we haven't done anything because we were actually working in 23 local governments. So it was actually, we did this in the period of 3 years. It's actually a 5-year project and we had extension. So we did this particular work in 3 years. So after that project, I got to another project some years later, which we are actually going to use the same model. But this time around, we were actually looking at how can we expand the scope of those we are targeting as champions or promoters or advocates. So we included journalists on top of the religious leaders and some traditional leaders. And we included physicians like obstetric gynecologists from teaching hospitals and others that are serving in the government facilities. So we form what we call Social and Behavioral Change Advocacy Co-Group. And actually their main role is to promote family planning, because we want in that project called HC3, Health Communication Capacity Collaborative. It was actually implemented by John Hopkins Center for Communication Program, JHUCCP. We had a headway, but it took us long. Let me say a year plus. What we did was actually to invite the religious leaders from all the local governments, selected few, and we actually asked them, we have been hearing this issue. Many are saying family planning is not religious. Can you please share with us where the religion says don't space or don't use contraception? Go and do your research. We want to listen. It was actually a symposium. And our target then was actually not only those religious leaders we invited, we actually invited some of their figureheads, those that control the group or the sect. A lot of scholars made their presentations and they said it's actually not prohibited in Islam. And it was practiced during the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they gave what they used then as a contraception, as a method of contraception, which is actually the withdrawal method. And there wasn't anything. And some of them cited some verses from Holy Quran and some hadiths, that the saying of the prophets. Some agreed, yes, there are all these prohibitions, but still they think family planning is a Western agenda to reduce the population of northern Nigeria. So why I said we made headways, initially beyond the halls where we do conduct meetings, the religious leaders don't talk about family planning. Now we have religious leaders in radio stations promoting childbirth spacing. We have religious leaders after their prayer sessions talking about childbirth spacing. So they were, I can say like 6-7 years. And we're still working with them actually in a new project called Breakthrough Action Nigeria, BAN. So it's actually, advocacy is an ongoing thing. And as you're moving, you are reviewing and you are adjusting your plans and looking at, okay, who should you actually engage? Who can add voice or who can create that space for you to pass and to penetrate and pass your message. So actually, religious leaders, many of them now, are actually promoters of childbirth spacing. So also the traditional leaders. And actually some of the traditional leaders doesn't have anything against family planning. But the only fear is actually they are the only ones that are going to talk about it. And probably their followers may revolt against them or disrespect them or some other sort of things. But when we have the religious leaders and some of the journalists actually that are working in the radio stations, creating platforms and programs for them to come and speak, we actually have reached somewhere now. So I think this is what I have to share. I have other scenarios, but this is actually stood for me because it took us so many years to achieve this. Okay, so the first thing was actually, the first mistake that I would cite is we didn't ask them to check the religious scriptures themselves and come to explain to us. They should go and find their evidence and information to convince us that it's actually prohibited, that we shouldn't be promoting childbirth spacing in Sokoto. But when we did that in the second project, they came with so many evidence that family planning is accepted in Islam, we have our headways. And actually with that, most of them feel powerful or felt powerful to go to radio stations and talk about it, to go to communities and preach about family planning, or to talk about it during Juma, khutbah, what we call free sermons during Friday prayers, or also after daily 5 daily prayers to talk about it. So actually, this is some of the things that we have achieved. Another one was actually, okay, yes, can we only have religious leaders talking in mosque, talking in their Islamic schools where they are teaching? We also need additional resource group. We know there are female religious leaders in northern Nigeria. To be specific, in Sokoto, we have many. We said, okay, can we get them involved? We also have journalists. They have a lot of health programs. Can we leverage on that? How can we do that? Let's invite them into the cycle, into the group, so that we can have a shared agenda and also talk about it. And the reason why we also invited gynecologists from teaching hospital and other health facilities is actually for them to provide the technical know-how, the technical explanation about some of the side effects and other things. So when we actually have this formation, we actually had our headway. So things are actually improving now. Yeah.
Okay, I will just build on what he said. Part of the mistakes we did was we thought if we were able to talk to the heads of traditional leaders and religious leaders, we were going to make headways. But because we did not take other critical stakeholders along, the other gatekeepers, it's brought a lot of problems for us in some states, especially the new states where we started implementation later on, not Kaduna State. Because Kaduna State, we had been working for a long time, people knew us and other things. So like for Bauchi, when we went to Bauchi the first time, and we just met with some key religious and traditional leaders, gave them our curriculum. They looked at it because our curriculum not only reinforces literacy and numeracy, it has sessions on sexual and reproductive health, GBV, and also critical life skills on how girls should communicate, negotiate their issues on their lives and other things. So when some people when some of our mentors went and started the safe spaces, some could not pronounce the safe spaces well and they called it sex spaces. And unfortunately for us, when they said that, someone was passing through a window and he heard it. So he just went out into the community and was like, these people that just came in and are advocating for girls' education and are not teaching our girls education, they're teaching them sex education. And we did not know, we were supposed to, it was in Ningi local government then. So we were supposed to pay a visit the next day to Ningi, and one of the people we engaged earlier just heard people talking that if our car comes into the community, we should be stoned out of the community. So it was going to be a lot of things for us. So he quickly called our state team leader was in the state and told her to suspend any activity for that week, that we needed to come back to the community and come and meet with the traditional leader and see how we can reach the other stakeholders so that we can, like, the misconception that was in that community, because it was really, people were talking about it. I even saw a post on Facebook about us and other things like that. So we had to go in, meet with stakeholders, spent a lot of hours. When we were going in, the religious leaders, traditional leaders, the other gatekeepers, like the boys, the men group and other people. So when we were going, we had to go in with the Ministry of Education. We had to go in with security outfit from the state because they already know what we are doing. So we had to get representatives from there so that they will be there to see the evidence of what happened, and we were able to cushion the issues out. But it was really a very, if we had gone in without knowing, I don't know what it would have escalated to. So, mostly I would say most of the issues comes up from the contents of our curriculum. When they see adolescent sexual reproductive health, they feel we are trying to like make their girls promiscuous and everything. But what we have done to curb that is when we are developing our curriculum, we always say is a draft. We always get traditional religious leaders. We have a workshop with them. They look at the contents. They bring verses from the Quran that if the content is not socially and culturally acceptable, they tell us, we remove or we change the wordings of that curriculum. So that's what we have been doing, and every year in year out we do that with our religious and traditional leaders, and I think it have helped us a long way.
It's a round of applause for saying that. Over to you, Shamuel. Same question. So what has been the mistake in your advocacy journey? Have you learned from it one way or the other? Just share it.
Yes, as I said earlier, one of the mistakes we have made, and which we later come to realize is a big mistake, is focusing more on women group and women themselves without consulting or putting husbands as part of our stakeholders. It's one of the mistakes we have done as at that time. However, when we realized that the role husbands plays in decision within the family, then we created that men's group, and it helped us a lot. And another mistake we did as at that time is we neglected this women group, like market women group and stuff like that. We neglected them as at that time, and there is another name they give them. It's like a head of women in terms of community engagement with political actors. Women leader, something like that. Women leader.
What do you call them, sir? Women leaders.
Women leaders. So we did not put them, because at that time our reason was thinking to avoid any political turn to our own advocacy. So that is the reason for us, that is what we think. So we did not involve them. However, later on we come to realize those women leaders has go back, after we have done our sensitization outreaches, they will go back with a different information and narrative of what we come up with. So we realize they become like a saboteurs. They have, while we think we have made 2 steps ahead, they will cut 1 step. So we come back and put them as our part of our major stakeholders. It's another mistake we have done as at that time. And the last but not the least, we have that kind of enthusiasm of most of our development workers of wanting to change immediately. So it's one of the mistakes we have made. Later on, after studies and also analysis of our data, we come to realize that changing cultural norms and religious misconceptions cannot happen within just a short period of time. As you have heard, the 2 panelists has said, some of them have spent almost 6 years trying to change some of this narrative. Some of them spent 3 years to change that kind of narrative. So for all of us in the advocacy field, whatever you are advocating, especially if it relates to traditional belief and religious misconceptions, it cannot happen overnight. You have to do it again and again and again before you get a win. It's not something that you think, maybe you said, I will get it happen in a month or a year. No, you don't have that power of determining the timeline of outcome while engaging in advocacy on issues that relate to our traditional sensitivity and religious emotional belief.
So during your advocacy, what particular group has been helpful? Can you say a particular group has been helpful?
Oh, there is a group created after we come to realize some of the mistakes we have made. One of the existing structure of group that we use is what is referred to as Ward Development Committee. In each polling unit or ward, they have that kind of committee which encompasses religious, traditional, youth, women group, different representation of community group in that particular ward development committee. Initially, we did not involve them. Later on, after analyzing our impact and things like that, we bring them on board.
Even in non-political, because your advocacy was totally
Non-political, yeah.
able to involve
In the Ward Development Committee, there is a representation of all political parties in that particular group. There is also representation of different religious sects in that particular group. So it's a group that I will elaborate and work with in different projects that relate to the community. We work with that Ward Development Committee in promoting client-oriented provider efficiency services supported by UNICEF. We also work with that particular group because we come to realize they have that very strong power. They can make OMA your own project within a very short period of time. But if the group unanimously agree on a particular issue that you come with and give you some certain changes of wording and communication on how to go about it, you have even past 50% of your success. So it's one of the lessons we learn. And another thing, as we go on, we come up with what they call advocacy core group. So it is not specific on whether it is focused on reproductive health or on education or on gender-based violence. It's a group of influential personality, religious leaders, technocrat or expert in different fields that come together to form that advocacy core group. The purpose of that group is that whatever advocacy you come up with, if you consult them as major stakeholders, they will look at your project or program that you are advocating for. If they see that maybe some of the technical words you put are too complex and the people may perceive it wrongly, they will advise you on the best word to put on your own advocacy. And even some of them, they will lead you to the community and other major stakeholders that you need access to them. Because sometimes also NGOs, we made mistake of thinking that we can go directly to the community. It's a very big mistake because I can remember I volunteered with one organization to do that kind of work to reduce the rate of maternal and neonatal mortality and morbidity. What we did was, we feel like let us sensitize the community members as well as service providers at primary health care facilities on how to go about giving emergency services to women on labor and stuff like that. So however, we did not notify the government officials. So there is this powerfully, I think even yesterday we talked about it. Government officials or government workers, we tend to look at them as saboteurs. But in most cases, if you are able to sell your idea to them, convince them the importance, the benefit, not only the community that you are going to work stand to gain, but also the entire state stand to gain, they will give you a lot of support. And they will even write to local government directors to give you all the support you needed in order to get entry into those communities.
I'll have to cut you. So what he said basically that caught my attention was, don't think you can just go, you need government officials basically, right? Yeah. And he also highlighted some other mistakes that he made. So I want to focus on Zainab for a bit. How did you measure your success with regards to education and making sure that more girls were able to enroll in schools? And then secondly, I want to hear more about the SRH advocacy that you did, if there was.
So for our measure of success, as you stated it, when we started with just 2 communities in Zaria. That was in Dakachi and I can't remember the name of the other community. In Dakachi, they were receptive of it, but in the other community, Well, eventually we had to leave the community because we didn't get the buy-in we wanted. So after the next year, we went to another community. And in that community, when we got there, they had never had a female primary school graduate in that community. And that community is, I think the mother of the late emir was from that community. So you could imagine it had a third road. It had all the facilities needed. It was just not far from Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital, Shika. But they had never had a single primary school graduate, a community that have existed for over 100 years. So when we started, we had a lot of people not wanting to engage, to enroll their girls. But we had 3 particular people who promised us that their girls will continue schooling. As a result of it, one of the fathers had to divorce his wife because she insisted that her daughter was not going to go to school. She wanted her daughter to get married like her other cohorts. But eventually, when we started, the first year, they saw the importance of what we were doing. Then the next year, when we came back, 50 girls were in school uniform. So continuously, after like 4 years, when we went back to that community, you could hardly find an out-of-school girl in that community. So it started that way. For the first 4 years that we worked, we were able to delay the age of marriage by 2.5. When we started, the baseline we had was girls married at the median age of 15.4. But after like 4 years of our work in Zaria, communities in Zaria, when we did the research again, we were able to see that we had an increase of median age of marriage to 17.4 years of what we were doing because of the safe spaces. People were seeing that when their girls go to school, even their own personalities change. Parents were telling us that, okay, one thing that stood out for us when we started was when we were doing the community engagement with parents, one mother stood up and said, I sent my first daughter to school. She spent 6 years, but she cannot read or write. So why should I send the other girl? So we took up that and we decided to strengthen their literacy and numeracy. So girls will go out with their mothers for antenatal and she'll be telling the mom the signs that are in the hospital. And that helped us a lot, seeing that their girls could read and write. So it helped us a lot. And parents will say, even at home, their personal hygiene had improved. Girls were helping at home. They will tell their younger ones, don't eat food without washing your hands. All those things that we were teaching them in the safe spaces. And eventually, they had a better life outcome because of that. So we started with just 46 girls. But after we started in 2007, as at now, we have over 50,000 girls that we have worked and are working with in 5 states in northern Nigeria. So I think that's a threshold for us of success. We have delayed the age of marriage in a lot of communities. Marriages that have been contracted supposed to have happened have been like cancelled and a lot of things. So we have seen that, and we have girls that are now, for our first cohort of girls, those that have never dreamt of going to tertiary institutions. We have girls that are now graduates from federal colleges of education. We have a university graduate. They are also mentoring other girls within their communities because that's one of the sustainability strategies we use. We absorb those girls back into our organization. We have interns amongst them who work within the organization, and we have cascading mentors who are mentoring other girls within their organization. So they are like assistant mentors because they have not graduated. We don't give them full spaces for them to run, but they assist other mentors. If it's supposed to be 3 sessions in a week, the first mentor does the 2 sessions and they do the 3rd session. And because of that, parents are saying that it's those girls that started that are becoming teachers and future. So they're allowing more girls to go to school. So, thank you.
Yeah, so actually I can cite 2 things. There is what we call DHIS. It's actually a national M&E software that captures the number of clients that are going to facilities. So we have seen constant increment of number of women that are accessing childbirth spacing in the state, especially in all the local governments. Let me say all the local governments where we are working. We have also seen the increment after the recent NDHS in 2018. So it was actually below 1%, but it's now almost about 2%. So actually that we can say is an increment. So it's still an ongoing intervention, and it's still, family planning is something that you can't just do once. Maybe if it's permanent, you can do once, but when you need to maybe give back, because we are promoting spacing, so we actually want women to continue going to facilities to access those services. Yeah. Over.
Ready. So, I don't know if mine is a question or a comment. I think it's a mixture of both. I'll try to be brief. I see a lot of times we try to put in stakeholders, talk about stakeholders, and we are gunning for the imams, the village heads, district heads, and co. What I want to say is, talking about the inclusion of families, because family is the basic unit of the society. Coming from my own side of the country, where it's both, kind of. My own side of the country, where you cannot even, I work at a radio station, you cannot go on air and say they had sex. They will stop that program. Like, coming from that part, and you want people to take decisions regarding their children or their wives, you are not involving them as family heads, like he rightly pointed. This whole ego thing with men, they feel like the head of the family, and you are going to go and tell them that you want their children to have child rights. So I don't know, don't you think it's imperative that we actually include the families in this thing? For example, I work with Equal Access in 2018. I know they have varieties of programs that, though Equal Access talks about peace, counter-narrative, violence, and all. So they have variety of programs, dramas that they do on IO 24, and they fuse in the messages, because families sit down when it's night, everybody wants to watch one or two. So don't you think it's very, very important that we establish a platform where we rightfully engage the parents and the families, basically, even the children themselves, let them know what is being said and how it's going to benefit them?
Okay, good afternoon. My question is not really, it's just to find out about, it's for you, Zainab. Please, I want to know the persons or the people funding Center for Girls Education. And is it like a continuous thing? Then I also want to know if you charge a fee for the schooling of the girls. That's all.
Good day, everyone. My question is actually directed to you, Maozo. You said, you mentioned that in Sokoto, you people have been promoting family planning. So I just want to know, are you promoting basically for married women, that's women that have given birth, or are young persons also included in these advocacy? And what are traditional rulers, that's the stakeholders you meet, what are their perspective about young people also, assessing family planning? Yes, because from where I work currently, the Adolescent and Youth Friendly Center in Calabar, we actually encourage young people to assess family planning because the rate of teenage pregnancy is high. So I want to know if in Sokoto you are also doing this, and how the traditional rulers, what's their...
Okay, as you rightly pointed out, I completely agree with you. Family should be included. However, you should know, in most of our northern states, we live in denial that young people are having sex. As a young person, if I'm going out to have sex with any other woman, I don't take permission from my parent. And the only time my family or parent will know is after the consequential effect has happened. After the happening has happened, then they will be able to know. So you also need to understand this kind of right to privacy. There are certain things, personally, I cannot share with you, whether you are my parent or you are my guardian. And there are certain things that young people can be able to talk to service provider freely if there is no parent or guardian close. When they see their parent or guardian close, they will not be able to talk to them about it. But I agree with you completely that as the first agent of socialization, family is very paramount and important to be included in advocacy towards providing sexual and reproductive health services in our community. However, that inclusion should be done strategically to avoid other sabotage or break in the bridge that is already been built. That is one. Number two, it is always good. As I said earlier, we have those stakeholders that we talk about, be it in the World Development Committee, be it in Majalisi Group, be it in community group, all of these belong to different families. Some of them are heads of their own families and are friends to other heads of their own family. So indirectly, family is involved. It's just that physically it has not been stated as a standalone involvement or inclusion. Thank you very much.
Okay, so you gave me 2 questions. You said you want to know the funding bodies of our organization. We are funded by different international donors, UNFPA, Malala Funds, MacArthur, Packard. We have been funded by a lot of organizations, and we also have private donors who also fund us. And for our girls, they don't pay any fee for all the activities that we do with them. So we pay for their school fees, if school fees is supposed to be paid in that state. We provide them with uniforms, books. We provide them with healthy snacks after school when they stay back for the safe spaces. And any writing material that they need or reading material is provided to them free of charge within that period of their stay in. And we also, we have also had instances where we don't have money to pay for like WAEC or NACO. We go out, talk to stakeholders within the community, and we are able to mobilize funds to fund for them to continue their schooling. So they don't pay a dime for anything we do for them. Yeah, normally if we take a girl, she passes through 2 years of safe spaces, but we continue following her to ensure that she's in school.
Okay, so that 2 years of safe spaces is where you provide
all those materials, yes. And in cases where we think if we don't provide things for her, she might drop out of school, we still find ways to continue funding her. We still have girls in tertiary institutions that have finished our safe spaces, but because they are not able to fund their schooling, we get private donors to fund their schooling for them till they finish. So, and also within us, sometimes we mobilize resources within the organization because we know the importance of what we are doing. And also, let me just touch a little about what you said about family. We don't involve any girl in our safe spaces whom we don't have her parents' consent to get into our program. We don't do that. So a father or a mother must be present when we are enrolling our girl into our safe space. That's just what we do.
Yeah, I think I have 2 questions. I will respond to first question from Amina, and then the second question for me. The first question is actually, in all we do, we do involve families. But don't forget, we're sharing experience about advocacies. So that's why I didn't touch the other aspect. For us, actually, we have what we call social mobilizers. They are volunteers who go house to house to talk to women and husbands about childbirth space and other MNCH issues. So we do actually have that component. We also have an ongoing drama that is running constantly on Rima Radio, about 4 different radio stations. Maybe you have heard about Albishirunko and getting back, because one of the FM stations. It's one of our flagship campaign. So we have a lot of those that we are engaging families and head of households with, just to get them into the discussion. Coming back to your question, yes, our focus, most of projects have funders, and actually the funders have instruction on what to do and what not to do. So for us, the target is actually women of childbearing age. But because of the nature of the state where we work, we actually focus on married women, because it's easier for you to promote childbirth spacing. Because, so initially you are even struggling to get married women to accept contraception. And actually they have the bulk number or the large number of people that are having sex and giving birth. So we actually want to, and we also have the highest number of women that are dying from pregnancy from that cohort. So actually our focus was to get them to accept family planning. Yes, let me share an experience with you. Through one of our community programs, after a session by our volunteer and a religious leader from one village, meet her out at the outside of the community. Because after our community session, we do issue referral cards for anybody that wants to go to access family planning, to go to the facility and issue that referral card, and the service provider will actually know that yes, he was referred from this project, and he or she will be attended to. And he asked her that can she give him the referral card. He actually wants to collect for his unmarried daughter. She's having sex, and his fear is because he's a religious leader, he's well known, and it's actually a small community. So his fear was actually if she got pregnant, and the next thing for him is just to No, leave the community because he can't. Yes, no. Who will marry her? I don't think in that community at that moment when she said she had unwanted pregnancy or unprepared pregnancy, nobody will marry her in that community. And because he is the religious leader, let me be specific. He is an imam in that community, so that's why he can't talk during that session. He has to meet her at the outskirts of the community while she's coming back from that community to collect the referral card for his daughter. So these are actually some of the scenarios. So our funders actually have more focus on women of childbearing age. So we don't have any specific program for adolescents and young people. In addition to that, actually, because we don't have high number of teenage pregnancy in the states. Yeah.
It would just shock you that it's possible that young people are actually woke in that area and they actually even know how to prevent themselves from actually getting pregnant. And so their focus area, I just have to point out that, it's state by state, and then they're looking at the prevalence of a particular situation amongst a particular group. And for them in Sokoto State, it was amongst the married people, and which is different from your own location as well. So who is number 3? Number 1 is you. Number 2, Emmanuel. Number 3, you. We're taking the third batch. So you're number 1, number 2. Who is number 3, finally?
My question is actually directed to Mr. Mwasu. Okay, you're actually talking about, during your course of advocacy, you made mention of cultural and religious, perhaps you encounter, those things you encounter. But my question is that, did you actually encounter anything political? The reason I'm asking this question is that we had a radio session last year, myself and Amina, with one medical practitioner. The second day, I was discussing something related to family planning with one of my lecturers in school. The man was trying to let me understand that it's beyond religion. Family planning is more cultural and political because the indoctrination in the northern part of Nigeria is actually that is politics is a game of number, and then people of which you are going to see as stakeholders or people to influential people, what do those people actually have ambition? And then their consideration would be, if I should advise these people not to give birth, who are those people to vote for me? So how do you factor that political undertone, if at all you encounter it?
So how do you factor the political undertone?
Yes.
This question
Who is the second person? Oh, sorry. People pay me for moderating your mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel. My question is, based on your experience, what insight can you share as regards managing financial expectations of the beneficiaries of this project, and then that, if any? And then secondly, what are the major components of this advocacy, like the budget of this advocacy, the major components? It's thrown out, yeah.
Who is next? Okay, please, pass it down.
Thank you very much. My name is Mercy. While she was talking, that's to Zainab, she mentioned aside numeracy and literacy skills for the girls, they also provide sexual and reproductive health information. So my question is there an advocacy, or is there like something for providing menstrual hygiene products for these girls? Then is there like some form of advocacy in schools, like to have maybe good hygiene system in the schools for these girls? That's my question.
Good hygiene systems and menstrual. I think she mentioned hygiene actually, but yeah. So who are we starting with? Number 1. Number 1 is for who?
Yeah, Tawhid, yeah. So I think I will dispel that myth, because for me it's myth. Because you have not had any politician campaigning and telling his people, go and give birth to people so that they can vote for whoever is contesting next time. So that's just a belief. The game of number in family size in northern Nigeria is not actually about politics, but about the politics in the house when the husband has money and he has more than one wife. You know, they're actually struggling for inheritance. So actually, and then probably if they are two wives, the one has one male and the other one has two male, the second one who has two males will have larger share than the one who have, that's the Islamic way of sharing inheritance, you know. So actually the game is more in the family than in politics. So the politics is within the family, not actually the current politics that we know it. I wanted to touch about Emmanuel's question. Yes, there are financial expectations, and we are still struggling with that, and we can't avoid that, simply because some of these religious leaders and traditional leaders we work with, or we are currently working with, have worked with organizations like UNICEF and the rest while implementing polio campaigns. And they had a lot of access to money then. And now we are saying, okay, we're not going to give you money to go and talk to your people. We want you to understand this. Okay, we are doing this project to serve the lives of women in your communities. So what will be your own contribution? Yes, we do give them transport allowances when we invite them for a meeting, but actually we don't pay them when they talk or speak out in the radio stations. It's just of recent that we are thinking of, okay, can we add to that and okay, start paying for their transport expenses when they are going to radio stations. Probably you may be somewhere doing something and then you had a session, a radio station, and you have to go there, and we are not there to pick you with your vehicle. You are the one, so some of it doesn't have vehicles. So we said, okay, and most of them are complaining actually. We said, okay, let's consider this and let's start paying them. We have not started, but it's something that we are considering. But actually we resisted that financial request from them. They were actually looking for money. But we told them actually, because what we told them was, can you leverage on the existing platforms that you have and you are using? As a religious leader, what we want from you, if you are an imam leading a prayer, after that prayer, turn to your followers or the people that were in the mosque, talk to them about these things. Simple. So you're not using any resources. Talk less of claiming your expenses, some things like that. Okay, if you are a teacher, you are teaching group of males or head of household, use that platform after the teaching session, talk to them about these issues. Simple. So actually, these are some of the platforms they are using. So we don't actually ask them to go out, gather a large crowd of people and talk to them. We ask them to use existing platforms that they have. So actually, that's what we use to turn down that request of financial support and the rest.
So I initially was to answer his question, but I think Muazu have done justice to that question. So I will go to Mercy's question about menstrual hygiene. Apart from teaching them to take care of themselves, we also, because we know that they come from very poor backgrounds, they might not be able to have access to money to buy sanitary pads. We train them on how to make sanitary pads using materials they get within the community, like clothes and other things, and how to keep those things clean when they are using it, how to the number of months they can use those clothes as sanitary pads, and when to dispose them. We teach them all on that, because we have vocational aspects within our safe spaces, especially for our out-of-school girls, because we don't just work with in-school girls, we work with out-of-school girls too. So we have vocational safe spaces for those out-of-school girls, where we teach them one vocation or the other, and at the end of it, we set up shops for them within these communities. We have girls who can repair phones now within our cohorts, out-of-school girls. They can do electric lamps and other things like that. So we have also those who sew those things so that other girls can have access to those materials as sanitary pads and other things. And for school hygiene, we recently conducted an advocacy campaign for free, safe, and quality education, and it was all embedded within it in Kaduna State. It was implemented through the Malala funding, and it's also continuing this year. We have funding for it again. So we work with schools to ensure that they provide safe, free, and quality hygiene for girls. So I think we do that too.
Thank you, Zainab. So our last batch, 2, please. 2. So number 1, your question briefly. Pass to number 2 and down.
Okay, thank you so much, Zainab. My question is to Zainab because it's educational based. Yes, so the first question is, do you work with persons with disability? How do you go about it, especially because it's education, the girls? Then the second question is, I hear you talk about education, at least them finishing secondary school. Is there a plan for, can you hear me? So the second question is, I hear you do education. Is there a plan for digital skills, introducing digital education for them? Because it actually goes a long way as well. Like beyond basic, you can, your dream, even when you finish secondary school, you can decide to continue because you have, at least you are digital literate. So is there a plan for that? And then the last question is, yes, the last question is, when you pay for education for a student, what happens when the student fails? Because let's look at that other part of it. What happens when the student did not pass? What do you do to that particular student?
All right. Thank you. As in my own aspect is just going to. I don't know the peculiarity of each region, but when Muazu was actually of each region. When Muazu was speaking about a project he was trying to carry out and involve traditional leaders and the likes, so I'm just looking at it in the context of the Southwest. I discovered that even if you involve traditional leaders and you don't call the attention of the government, what you're trying to push may not fly. And I see that, I want to ask, what's your relationship with the government? Because in the Southwest, before we can start the advocacy of family planning, it was when Ministry of Health and some other people start get it together in each local government, and people start coming to centers to have their family planning. So what's your relationship with the government in your region? Thank you.
State government without involving the so we're starting with Zainab.
Okay. So let me start from working with girls with disability. We have had cases of girls who are cripples who are within our safe spaces, and we had to go the extra mile because most of them don't even have wheelchairs and other things. Some of them, you'll see that they put slippers on their knees, and that's how they drag themselves to safe spaces or schools. So we have had cases where we will have to provide them with wheelchairs and other things just to make sure that they are comfortable enough. We had a case of a girl, I can't even say what her disability is. She's 14 years old, but I think she's just like this. And she's a fully grown woman. She can walk, she can talk, but she's not a dwarf. She's smaller than a dwarf because she's very tiny and small. So people within the community make fun of her. When she goes to school, she will just be walking and they will just be tossing her like a ball. So that really affected her and she stopped going to school. When we went into the community, people were stigmatizing her and were saying that if she sleeps at night, she becomes a giant, a lot of things. So it really dealt with her family self-esteem and also her own self-esteem. So when we went to the community, one of the teachers that was concerned about her told us about her, and we went and met her father. We discussed with him, and we promised him that he should re-enroll her back to school, and we will ensure that we are able to do whatever we can to keep her safe and ensure that she's getting the education she has. And she's one of our most brightest students that we have now in this safe space. I wish I had my other phone. I could have shown you a video of her. She's very bright. We interacted with her, and from the day she started coming back to school, we spoke with her safe space girls, and we told them the importance of ensuring that she comes to school every day, and they became like a safe space for her. They ensure that they come to school with her, they go back to school with her, nobody gets to make fun of her, and that really have developed her self-esteem, and she's one of the brightest now within the cohort. Then you also asked about if a girl fails. We don't believe in failure in education. No, everybody have his own everybody is smart. If I'm not good in one thing, I'm good in another. So just because you fail doesn't mean that we don't involve you in our safe space or we remove you from our safe space. So what if the person has to repeat the class? I think that we still take her along. We try as much as possible because when we start, we recognize the slow learners within our spaces and the fast learners. So the strength we give to the slow learners is different from the ones that we give to the fast learners. We try as much as possible to ensure that we take everybody at his pace. We don't take all of them at the same pace. That's why we don't put more than 20 girls in a safe space, so that the mentor have time with all of them. She knows, yes, one-on-one. She knows each other's peculiarity. We don't give a mentor more than 20 girls because we believe anything more than 20 is a classroom and she might not be able to manage it effectively. So that's what we try to do. And when we see that we have those kind of slow learners, we look for friends within the space that are fast learners and pair them up. Even at home, they try as much as possible to tutor each other and everything. So because we also try to ensure that as much as we train them in school, they form a network. So that, like, when we go to our first community now, if one girl have an issue, before she even tells us, others will tell us. They have that network within themselves. So we try and form that because we want them to grow up with that strong network so that they can help each other. So. Okay, it's something that we have started thinking about, and we are working towards seeing how we can ensure that too. Yeah. All right, no problem.
That's nice.
Give it to her.
Yeah, for me, your question, so it's actually a non-fact. There's no organization that will enter into a state and start working without engaging with government. It has never happened. So the first thing for even a project before the project even recruit staff is to engage with the state government, get their buy-in and do all the paperwork, and then go to the field and start implementing. And while we're doing this, we're doing it with all relevant officers and program managers in the ministries and the relevant agencies. So you can never achieve this without the support of government. You definitely have to engage government. Let me say the governor first, then down to the ministry and the different program officers, down up to the LGA level. So actually, it's something that every project do. So that's why actually I didn't mention that, because we don't have issues with them. Our issue is those influencers and promoters in the community who can talk and have about 50 people listen and adhere to what they've said. So how do we break that barrier? How do we break that cycle? Is to get those influencers engaged and involved into what we are doing. Thank you.
So with this, we've actually come to the end of this panel session. Please, a round of applause for our panelists as they take their seats. A round of applause for Shamwil, Zainab, and Muazu. Thank you very much. It was really interactive and I learned a lot. Thank you.